Machu Picchu, Art of Peru. Built in the mid-1400s by Shapa Inka Pachacuti Yupanqui to celebrate his conquest of the Chancas, Machu Picchu, or Old Peak, sits at 8,040 feet, 13 degrees south of the equator, on a narrow ridge between Machu Picchu Mountain and Huayna Picchu Mountain in a tropical mountain forest. Used for part of the year by Pachacuti's royal court, courtiers, and household servants, this Inca royal estate contains terraced fields and 200 white granite buildings, including residences, temples, shrines, fountains, baths, and stairways. Encircled on three sides by the sacred river Urubamba, 2,000 feet below, the location was chosen for its alignment with sacred mountains and water springs, celestial activities, and other royal residences. Machu Picchu beckons us to the empire of Tawantinsuyu, where Pachacuti served as the ninth Shapa Inka from AD 1438 to 1471. Pachacuti, or Earthshaker, first came to power by repelling a Chanca invasion of the Inca city Cusco, or center of the world, ruled by his father Huayna Inka. As ruler, Pachacuti's goal was to subdue neighboring territories and acquire resources. He sought to bring order and religion to all the world, as Inti, or father-son, had commanded of the first Incas. Emerging from Lake Titicaca, Mancho and Mama were sent to Earth to found a holy city, conquer the nations to the north, south, east, and west, and civilize the world. Manco, the first Shapa Inca, founded the city of Cusco. Pachacuti sent captains with troops to neighboring regions, promising the people that they would be treated as brothers if they accepted his divine sovereignty. The captains affirmed that Pachacuti was the son of Inti and that they should follow him. After sending emissaries with gifts of coca, blankets, clothing, and women, his army entered many lands without war. If defied, Pachacuti led up to 200,000 men into battle, brandishing spears, clubs with metal or stone heads, slings and stones, javelins, rope and spiked maces, and bolas. Some said these mere mortals transformed into ferocious jaguars, mountain lions, vultures, foxes, wildcats, and hawks during battle. After fierce battles, all pledged their allegiance. New subjects at once received all rights and benefits enjoyed by the rest of the community. Whatever they lacked, they were provided, be it food, flocks, fine wool, or supplies. In large provinces, the Incas built a temple to the sun and lodgings. They built 2 colcas, storage houses, in every village, the first kept for the use of the people in lean years, and the second for Inti and the Shapa Inka. Each province had to fill the colcas of Inti and the Shapa Inka with a moderate amount of what its territory produced as a tribute. The kingdom of Cusco expanded into an empire, Tawantinsuyu, 4 corners of the earth. For each department of 10,000 inhabitants, Pachacuti assigned governors from the Inca nobility and captains to rule, teach the people to cultivate and irrigate crops, speak Quechua, follow Inca laws, and worship the sun. Native lords retained authority over local rituals and traditions. Pachacuti did not deprive them of their customs as long as they also followed his. All laws emanated from Pachacuti. He established the Inca calendar based upon solstices, equinoxes, and other astronomical observations to determine when to plant crops, prune, irrigate, harvest crops, conduct religious rituals, and hold festivals. Establishing the purity of rulers as a chosen people through brother-sister marriage, Pachacuti married his elder sister, Mama Ana Uarque. He had many other wives and many children. Later, his son Shapa Inka Yupanqui would succeed him and marry his own sister, Mama Okyo. When Pachacuti conquered new regions, he built roads and bridges. The Chapakyan Royal Road extended 10,000 miles to facilitate movement of the army, communication between the capital and the far reaches of the empire, and transport of tribute goods. The Incas built 2,000 miles of road using heavy freestone or cement. Every half league, they built tambos, huts, for Chancas, fleet-footed messengers, who carried Pachacuti's orders, news, or sometimes fish, fruits, or game. Chancas passed verbal dispatches, or quipu, a numerical device made of threads and knots, from one messenger to another at the pace of 150 miles a day. Chancas also passed signals using smoke during the day or flames at night. The Incas built bridges of hand-twisted grass ropes, braided into thick cables for floors and handrails. Master bridge builders wove sides from both ends, meeting in the middle. Pachacuti ordered that bridges be kept in good repair. The Huanchiri, Chapibanda, Coquehua, and Huayna Kehu communities still maintain the Queshuachaca Bridge today. Pachacuti and his Coya, main wife, Mama Ana Huarque, a daughter of the moon, traveled throughout the empire in an elaborate litter encrusted with gold, silver, and precious gems. Their children, Mama Okyo, Shapa Inka Yupanqui, Kuki Huanan Chirek Inka, Manco Inka, Shapa Amaro Inka, and Maitek Inka also traveled by litter, as did the Shapa Inka's other wives, children, and associates. Troops and attendants accompanied them. Known for her obedience to her husband, the Coya had a beautiful round face, small eyes, and a small mouth. She had a fair complexion and lovely hands and feet. When angry or amused, she beat her chest and proclaimed, "Bless my soul, Lord Creator of the people." Then her attendants prostrated themselves. Pachacuti dressed in fine textiles made of richly dyed vicuña wool, sometimes adorned with emeralds, other precious stones, gold, or feathers. Only the Shapa Inka could wear kusmas, knee-length tunics, covered with tocapu, small rectangular units. Mama Coñas, Virgins of the Sun, combined 23 basic patterns into 156 different tocapu units, which represent places or lineages. Pachacuti also wore a hautu, turban of many colored folds, and a red tasseled fringe, topped with 2 coricanque feathers. The Incas herded 4 varieties of wool-bearing animals: llama, guanaco, alpaca, and vicuña. Only nobles could wear the fine fabric of the vicuña. After royal hunts, servants took wool to colcas or temples of the sun, where Mama Coñas dyed it, spun yarn, and wove cloth to create apparel, carpets, coverlets, and wall hangings for the Shapa Inka and his household. The Incas ate the meat or dried it in the sun and stored it in colcas. Tawantinsuyu eradicated poverty through the equal distribution of land and goods throughout the empire, made possible by elaborate inventories recorded in quipus. 2-foot-long quipus with different colored threads, tightly twisted together, from which a quantity of smaller threads descended and were tied in knots, were used to record numbers in a base 10 notation. The Incas recorded births, deaths, land, tributes, military readiness, the calendar, and employment records. They did not use quipus to count currency because they had none, but rather to count clothing, fabric, food, weapons, and raw materials like wool or metal, stored in colcas in every village. In spite of poor harvest or ill health, the Incas guaranteed their own survival through the distribution of goods from the colcas. Based on the quantity and fertility of the soil, they distributed land equally. Each man performed a small amount of required public service, with plenty of time to provide for his own household. At a glance of a quipu, Pachacuti knew the material, labor, and military strength of the empire. A huge lintel, stone beam, crosses the formal gateway to Machu Picchu. The opening frames the natural beauty of Huayna Picchu Mountain. A stone ring protrudes above the doorway on the inside of the gateway, and recessed bar holds inside would have sustained a closure mechanism for a gate. Pachacuti, his family, priests, and dignitaries entered here with great pomp, having been carried on litters along the Chapa from Cusco. Llamas carried deliveries through this doorway to colcas, which housed food, fine clothing, coarser garments, sandals, and weapons. Servants pushed heavy objects inside, aided by small rolling pebbles underneath. When the Shapa Inka and his entourage were present, the population swelled to about 1,000. The Incas constructed the white granite buildings in Machu Picchu using hammerstone and silver or bronze tools. The thatched roofs are missing today, but the stonework is still intact. Each building's size and quality reflect the prestige of its inhabitants or the importance of the activities within. Most high-status homes are in the northeast sector, top right. 14 Chancas, single-family group compounds, have buildings for sleeping, cooking, and storage within a walled-in area with a courtyard and a single entrance. 3 elite Chancas on eastern terraces have walls of finely cut and polished granite, double gem entryways, and trapezoidal wall niches. The Incas performed religious rites at temples and shrines scattered around the estate. They held festivals on the central plaza. With superior stonework and massive stone lintels, Pachacuti's royal cancha is west of the central plaza, adjacent to fountains next to the Torian, Temple of the Sun. The Shapa Inka's residence in the Torian once glimmered with gold plates inlaid with precious stones and wall niches filled with gold and silver flora and fauna sculptures. Pachacuti sat on a gold tiana seat placed on a square gold platform. He dined with tableware, pitchers, and utensils made of gold and silver. As symbols of the sun and the moon, these precious metals were considered sacred. Their use was restricted to religious offerings and objects or adornments used by the Shapa Inka, priests, or members of the royal family. The Incas believed water springs were sacred entrances used by mountain gods. On the northern slope of Machu Picchu Mountain, fresh spring water flows through a 2,456-foot stone-lined canal, 5 inches wide and 4 inches deep. Descending into Machu Picchu via gravity's pull, this water flows first through a sharp-lipped fountain spout, creating a falling jet of sacred mountain water into Pachacuti's private stone shower, where he took cleansing ceremonial baths. After draining through a channel in the shower's floor, the water descends into a cascading sequence of 15 additional fountains throughout the complex, where it was used for religious purification, drinking water, and household use. The ceremonial fountains of Machu Picchu still flow today. The Incas worshipped over 330 huacas, sacred objects embodying the gods, including shrines, boulders, mountains, landscapes, rivers, lakes, springs, oceans, caves, houses, and temples of the sun. They position huacas on 41 imaginary lines, Sikhs, which radiate from the holiest building in the empire, the Coricancha Temple of the Sun in Cusco. As the divine son of Inti, Pachacuti reverenced his kinship with landscape and celestial deities. He supported priests like his son, Yamke Yupanqui Topa, who affirmed those relationships through daily religious rites involving sequences of prayers and altar sacrifices. The Incas believed these elaborate ceremonies brought prosperity. Sitting at the highest point in the urban area of Machu Picchu, the Iti Huatana, place where the sun is tied up, is an elegantly carved stone waka with a tall vertical shaft. It is an ushnu, altar for sacrificial offerings. Sculptors form the itiwatana from the rock which forms its peak. Priests place sacrifices in its V-shaped depression pointing south, where its steps end. The 25-foot-long sacred rock waka resembles the sacred Mount Yanantan in the background. The Incas believed that high mountains were some of the most powerful deities. Priests invoked apus, mountain gods, to control weather, bless fertility of crops and animals, cure illnesses, and foretell the future. The Incas used the three-sided principal temple, constructed of huge precision-cut stones, for ritual offerings on its massive stone altar. Due to its weight, one corner of the building is sinking. Adjacent to its open side, terraces cascade steeply down the mountainside. At Pachacuti's order, sand was brought from the Pacific coast to the temple floor to symbolize the ocean, mother of all sacred waters. In the sand, Inca priests buried offerings of gold, silver, and precious shells for Pachamama, Mother Earth, during religious ceremonies. They filled pairs of kiros, cups, with chica, corn beer, and made toast to Inti. The Torian was inspired by the Coricancha Temple of the Sun. Inside the Torian, a window aligns with the rising sun's most northeastern point on the horizon, top of Serra San Gabriel Mountain, which occurs on the winter solstice, shortest day of the year. In war, Pachacuti wore a puma skin over his head to signify his kinship with this powerful predator. Inside the Torian, a sculpted rock puma outcrop served as an altar for sacrifices to Inti. Based upon his impression of an ancient site near Lake Titicaca, Pachacuti devised a new architectural style with precisely fitted stonework. A razor blade cannot fit through the gaps between the stones of the Torian's exterior. After more than 500 years, they remain firmly in place. Intimately involved with construction, Pachacuti helped measure the building's foundation. Inti Raymi, Feast of the Sun, began at the winter solstice. Prior to the festivities, there were no fires and 3 days of fasting. Pachacuti performed the first rites of Inti Raymi as high priest. He stood with 2 gold cups of chica, inviting the sun to drink from the cup in his right hand. Pachacuti poured the contents of that cup into a gold basin, from which it flowed along a stonework channel which ran into the Torian. Then the cup was replenished, and all the members of royal blood drank a draught. Others drank from the cup in his left hand. During Inti Raymi, the Incas dressed in their finest apparel, singing songs of triumph to music which swelled louder and louder as the sun arose. The Incas performed rituals to ask for blessings, protection, and healing, as they continue to do today. Priests drawn from the Inca nobility, sometimes led by Shapa Inka, offered sacrifices of flour, grain, and animals, usually llamas, on altars. The Incas celebrated for days with rituals, processions, colorful costumes, chica, feasting, music, and dancing. Many Peruvians still observe Inti Raymi today through reenactments. The Intimace Cave of the Sun stands on the eastern side of Machu Picchu. Builders created its southern wall and floor by cutting into the natural rock. They constructed its north side and top of stones. On the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, when the sun's rising on the horizon is at its most southeastern point, the rays of the sun travel through a notch in a far mountain ridge, through a unique tunnel-like window projecting onto the cave's back wall. As Tawantinsuyu boys of noble birth watched the sun rise on that day, their ears were pierced to receive their ear spools. The feast of Capac Raymi culminated with their initiation into manhood. Pachacuti's architectural style integrated new construction with existing sacred landscapes. Below the Torian and the royal mausoleum, fitted stonework seems to grow organically from a natural rock cave that faces the sunrise on the winter solstice. One small east-facing window was placed to observe the Pleiades star cluster. Its appearance in that window signaled the proper time to plant corn. The Incas perceived that caves or entrances into mountains where Apus reside. They believed that animals belonged to Apus. To ensure the growth and health of llama and other flocks, the Incas left offerings for these deities in the royal mausoleum and other caves. The Incas believed that llamas interceded for men with the gods. Some say a white llama called Napa always walked in front of Shapa Inka and accompanied him in song and prayer. Around Machu Picchu, 100 stone-faced terraces, each hundreds of feet long and 10 feet high, provided level land for crops: beans, potatoes, radishes, watercress, quinoa, 6 different varieties of corn, flowers, herbs, hot peppers for mourning ceremonies, and reeds for piercing the ears of young noblemen. The Incas constructed each tier with layers of topsoil, sand, small rocks, and large rocks. Stone walls formed the fronts and ends of each tier. Irrigation from dug canals and fertilizer from manure ensured the productivity of the terraces. Typically, the Inca divided land into 3 equal parts, one for Inti, one for Shapa Inka, and one for the people. However, they assigned terraces only to Inti and the Shapa Inka. As their main tribute, wearing their finest clothes reserved for their greatest festivities, the people sang joyful songs in praise of the Incas as they plowed, planted, and harvested crops of the terraces. Their labor was festive and happy because they performed it in the service of Inti and Pachacuti. Pachacuti likely stayed at Machu Picchu from May to September, when nightly frosts are common in Cusco. Away from the bustle of the capital, the Shapa Inka could relax and participate in religious rituals, festivals, and banquets. According to historical songs about his life, he was a lover of flowers. He enjoyed walking through his private garden of plants, flowers, and gold and silver plant sculptures. He could hear the soothing stream of crystal waters in the adjacent cascading fountains. Epidendrum secundum is one of almost 400 orchid species found at Machu Picchu today. At the time of his death, Pachacuti sang, "I was born as a lily in the garden." As the divine son of Inti, he was considered immortal. Upon his death, his body was mummified and transported with his Panica royal family to Machu Picchu and his other royal residences, held in perpetuity by his descendants. Machu Picchu is the lost city of Pachacuti. As the ruins cannot be seen from the foot of the mountain, they were overlooked during the Spanish conquest. The estate establishes the Shapa Inka's fulfillment of Inti's command to found a holy city, subdue the nations to the north, south, east, and west, and to civilize the world. Pachacuti created an extensive road system, a powerful army, a just government, a moral society, fine architecture, flourishing agriculture, rich cultural life, and a prosperous economy. Expanding the kingdom of Cusco, Tawantinsuyu would become the largest empire in the Western Hemisphere and one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. On this narrow ridge, enveloped by sacred mountains, clouds, and tropical forest, lies the last testament of Shapa Inka Pachacuti Yupanqui, that hallowed ground where the son of Inti roamed, is called Machu Picchu.